Hello, and thank you for watching this portion of our board workshop on SR2 and SR3. This segment explains changes in our academic universal screening tool that affects the way data is reported on our upcoming SR2 monitoring reports for literacy and numeracy. I'm Jennifer Apodaca, a Director of Student Services on the Teaching, Learning, and Equity team. During this screencast, I'll explain the evolution of the Universal Academic Screener used in Sun Prairie. Additionally, I'll explain how that evolution will show up on Student Results 2 monitoring reports for literacy and numeracy for the next 2 years. On November 21st, we will bring our student results policies forward for your review. Prior to that meeting, we thought it would be helpful to remind the board and the community of the journey we are on related to one of our SR2 measurement tools, our Universal Screener. Universal screening is a critical first step in identifying students who are at risk for experiencing reading and math difficulties, and therefore who might need more time in instruction or different instruction altogether. Screening is conducted to identify or predict students who may be at risk for poor learning outcomes. And since the 2013 school year, the Sun Prairie Area School District has used STAR literacy and STAR math assessments as our universal academic screeners. Additionally, we've used this data as a vital measurement on our district, department, and school scorecards. This data is also reported on SR2s for literacy and for numeracy. Because we are committed to continuous improvement in Sun Prairie, the evaluation that we did of our equitable multi-level systems of support, of which screening is a part, really showed us over time that we needed to have greater alignment between our universal screening, our intervention programming, and our progress monitoring. This fell into a multi-year review. Before COVID, teachers were not finding value in the information that was being provided to them by STAR. They were finding that it was taking too long to administer the assessment. The results really weren't relevant beyond screening for risk, and the data that they would get was not easily used to inform instruction. Also before COVID, Sun Prairie began using FastBridge, which is another assessment tool, as the tool for progress monitoring or measuring the progress that students were making when they were receiving interventions or special education services. Because we used FastBridge for progress monitoring, it has to be said that STAR does not have a progress monitoring tool built in. Because we used FastBridge, students had to first be screened through STAR. Then they had to complete an additional FastBridge screening in order to identify the appropriate progress monitoring tool that we would use to monitor the effectiveness of the intervention. So in essence, students who really needed additional instructional support had to complete another screening tool before they could have their growth in their intervention be monitored. And that was found to be really inefficient. Right after COVID, or as we were beginning to come out of COVID, our teachers articulated that they really needed help identifying those specific skills that were contributing to the gaps that students were experiencing or showing in reading and in math. The screening scores that we received from STAR weren't helping to identify those skills in the way that our teachers really needed them to. And that way, therefore, we weren't able to remediate those skill gaps as quickly as we had liked to. Also, after COVID, we decided to move our students with disabilities to FastBridge Universal Screening for exactly the reason listed in the bullet point above. We had to be able to look at more specific skills, not broad skills, but more specific skills that students needed to be explicitly taught and then monitored in order to see them grow. We did that both from a standpoint of efficiency. We didn't have time to wait given the impact of the pandemic. And also we knew as a system that we needed to start piloting some other screeners. And so we decided to go first with our students with disabilities. Additionally, in that same year then, a committee was assembled to study and recommend revisions to our universal screening practices that would align with our district priorities. That committee that met last year recommended that we evolve to FastBridge for our universal screener. So the result is that we have a new universal screener rollout plan. So last year, which was our first year of coming out of the pandemic, the 21-22 school year, we had 2 universal screeners that were in existence in our system. STAR was used for students in grades K through 10 who did not have disabilities, who did not have IEPs. And FastBridge was used for students kindergarten through 10th grade, for students that do have disabilities, students that do have IEPs. Again, that was part of our roll-in plan. And it also allowed us to provide, because we do a screener right away in the fall, it provided a little bit of pilot information that could be used by the committee that made the decision to make this evolution. This year, in the 22-23 school year, we continue to have 2 universal screeners in place. STAR is used with our high school students, but FastBridge is now being used with all students in kindergarten through 8th grade. And then next year, we anticipate that FastBridge will be used with all students. So what you see here on this graph is a 3-year transition plan from STAR to FastBridge as our universal screener for academics, in math, and in literacy. Well, this was a really good move for our students and a really good move for our teachers. This move does require a slight patch to how we report this data on our SR2s for literacy and for numeracy. This patch was originally shared with the board last June. I share it here again, just as a timely reminder to you, as you receive our SR2s on November 21st, that there will be 2 universal screening data sources shared when we're reporting out our universal screening data from last year. Because, as the previous slide showed, we had students without disabilities screened using STAR, students with disabilities screened using FastBridge. That's why you will see this patch in place actually for 2 years. It'll just be for a different reason when you see it next year. Lastly, this slide is one more visual representation of the factors that have influenced the reporting measures for SR2 in literacy and numeracy since the 2018-2019 school year. You can see the pandemic years reflected right here. You can see the screener transition reflected right here in this fuchsia row. And you can also see changes that have occurred since 2018 to the state assessments that are utilized and reported as part of our SR2s, as well as one that will be also coming, that will happen for us this year, which means you won't see it reported until next year. So we've been through a lot, not just a pandemic, in the last 5 years. Thank you for taking the time to learn more about the changes in our academic universal screening practices and how those changes will show up on our SR2s for literacy and numeracy this year and in the coming years. Please bring your questions regarding this presentation to our in-person board workshop on November 7th, and I will see you there. Take care.